and keep pushing for her. They certainly do.
He wanted to upload something that Janice hadn't given him. He wanted to show it on the TV differently than just... It's an exhibit from previous day.
Thank you, Rick. Okay, we're going to begin. This is a regular meeting of the Montclair Zoning Board of Adjustment for September 20th, 2023. Notice has been given in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act by posting a copy of the notice on the first floor of the municipal building and sending a copy to the Montclair Times. This is a public hearing in which any members of the public are welcome to attend. The meeting agenda is available on the Montclair website, as is a link to the Township's YouTube channel where the hearing can be viewed live or after the fact. The hearing is also being televised on Channel 34. We're going to take a roll call. We're going to start at the far end with Mr. McCullough.
Present.
Mr. Caulfield.
Here.
Mr. Church.
Here.
Mr. Harrison.
Here.
Mr. Simon.
Here.
Mr. Vieira.
Here.
And Mr. Sullivan.
Here. We have the minutes of the October 16th meeting. I have a couple of changes. At the bottom of page 1, you have Tommy and not you being present, which...
Oh, yeah.
And on page 5, line 1, you need to capitalize Maple. And condition 2 at the bottom of that page, at the end of the existing sentence, add a sentence that says, the approved use variance is for the use of the consolidated lots as a warehouse.
Which condition number was that now?
2. So we're consolidating the lots and we're saying it's for a warehouse.
Okay. Thank you.
So, because it's, otherwise you have to look to see what exactly we approved and probably better in the conditions. Any other changes? Not someone want to move the minutes as amended?
I'll move the minutes as amended.
So second,
Second.
all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Abstain.
Thank you.
Okay, and then we have the resolution for the property on Maple Avenue. I have 2 changes to that. On page 2, where it's a listing of the various plans that were submitted, there needs to be added before the turning exhibit, a grading and drainage plan prepared by William P. Stimmel, P.E. of Stimmel Engineering, you know, from the same as below, and dated July 17th, 2023. You can get all of that from the minutes.
Yes.
And then the same change to
The
condition
condition.
2 on page.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Any other changes to that resolution? If not, someone want to move the resolution with those changes?
I'll move the resolution, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
Thank you.
Abstention. The resolution for the Watchung Avenue property, I don't have any changes to that resolution. Anyone else have any changes? If not, someone want to move the resolution?
I'll move the resolution, Mr. Chairman.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Abstentions?
Abstain.
Abstain. Okay. Then we have the request for the extension of time for the property at 48 Walnut Street.
Yes.
I don't know if anyone has any comments on that. The approval lapsed when?
This past April.
April 20, 2020, correct.
They are seeking to get started. This came about through the submission of construction permits, so
And-
It's, the extension that we grant can be relatively
Oh,
near term.
let's do it through April 20,
Okay.
2024.
That's what we're committed to do, so.
Okay.
Any discussion? If not, someone want to make a motion to grant an extension until April, whatever the date was, 2020?
2024.
I move the extension.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
We have an announcement to postpone an application on tonight's agenda. At the request of the applicant, the application of Marie Gauntlett, 176 Walnut Street, is postponed from tonight to the board's next meeting on October 18th, 2023. The applicant has granted the board an extension of time, and I suppose that no further notice would be given.
So if anyone's here for that application at 176 Walnut Street, though, that is going to be heard on October 18th. You'll not receive any further notice, so if you're here for that, come back in 4 weeks. The first application is that of Kathleen E. Bryant for a variance for proposed reconstruction and enlargement of a rear porch on the property at 59 Woodmont Road. The property is in the ROA One Family Zone District and is designated on the township tax maps as Lot 77 and Block 4702. A variance is requested from Montclair Code Section 347-39C in that the minimum permitted rear yard setback is 39.78 feet and a rear yard setback of 29.31 feet is proposed. Are taxes in order, taxes paid, and notice in order?
Yes, the taxes are current, and proof of service was received from the applicant, and proof of publication of the notice was also received.
All right, I'm going to swear the two witnesses in. Would you both raise your right hands? Would you swear to tell the truth in the matter pending before the board? State your names and addresses, beginning with the applicant.
Kathleen E. Bryant, 59 Woodmont Road, Montclair.
Mark Wright, Wright and Robinson Architects.
Mr. Wright, you're a registered architect of the state of New Jersey, is that correct?
Yes, I am.
All right, I'm going to swear, let's have your business address also.
63 Adams Place in Glen Ridge.
Going to swear in Mr. Sharoon. Would you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth in the matter pending before the board?
Yes, I do.
State your name and position with the township.
Richard Sharoon, planning technician and zoning officer in the planning department.
Thank you.
Okay, proceed to explain what you're proposing to do to the house.
Okay, shall I just go and move in first? Our clients Kathleen and Mark have engaged us to renovate their home. A part of that project is a small enlargement of the footprint of a single-story screened porch. The enlargement is intended to allow for both a picnic table and a sitting area in the sun. This is an enlargement of one of the images you have in your package showing this little dot in red here, where that is in relation to the properties around. The lot slopes up from the street and is irregular in shape, with its rear lot lines set at a pronounced angle. This angle is followed closely by the retaining wall their neighbor built when they leveled their lawn behind. The house was built in a ranch vernacular style in 1960. Its existing water-damaged rear porch is to be rebuilt on its original footprint and with a similar roof form. All improvements are as of right, except that we propose to add 49 square feet to the porch footprint on the north side of the house, where it will receive morning sunshine and allow the owner's vegetable garden behind the house to remain. The porch remains modest in size, low in scale, and is, we believe, appropriate to the design of the original house. The enlarged house will comply with the 65% maximum width, and it will comply with the 18-foot side yard setback. However, the existing house is non-compliant with the rear setback. The required rear yard is 30% of the depth of the lot measured along its center line. As shown in the zoning table on sheet L1, on this lot, the required setback comes to approximately 39.78 feet. It is, however, 29.31 feet as originally built, which is a non-compliance of about 10 feet. We have configured the porch addition with an angled wall so as not to decrease the existing rear non-compliant setback dimension. We do, however, propose to increase the non-compliance with the rear setback by 49 square feet in area. The owners requested zoning relief tonight on the grounds that the lot's irregular shape, coupled with the location of the original house upon it, creates a compliance hardship. We suggest that the modest addition we propose balances our client's interests with the interests of the community in the spirit of the zoning ordinance. And we thank you for considering our request. If you have any questions,
Any questions?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is it Mr. Wright?
yes.
Okay, thank you. So, thank you for your presentation. So, just a couple of questions. So the existing porch itself will be demolished, is that?
It will be taken down because it is seriously compromised by water, which runs down the hill from the lots up above it. And it doesn't need to be made, doesn't really want to be made deeper towards the back of the lot. We just want to put it back where, we just want to keep it established where it is.
So the entire structure will be removed, and then your intent is to then build a new porch following the exact same design?
It will not be, it's not the exact same design. The existing porch is enclosed with jalousie windows, which we all dislike. So we're changing the design of the porch visually, and we're changing the height of the roof somewhat to cover the slightly wider face of the porch.
But the basic structure of the new porch will resemble what is being removed?
Very clearly.
Okay, so it's the cosmetics that will be largely different?
It's cosmetics, yes.
Right. And currently, as I understand it from Ms. Bryant, that the porch is a 3-season, basically, at this point, and that's the intent moving forward?
Yes, sir.
So would you talk a little bit about the problem with water? Because from what I understand, there's a lot of water that runs off from the hill behind, from the property behind.
Yes.
And how is that going to be addressed in the new structure since?
You will see on Plan L1 that we are building a more formally constructed patio, which is going to be cut into the hillside. So the ground behind the house has over the years risen up because of material washing down the hill, and it's now right up at the level of the wood sill plates on top of the foundation. So our intent is to cut the grade down somewhat, and then for a distance of about 14 feet, pitch the grade away from the house, and then so that any water that is back there, which now ponds against the house, would be carried out away from the house to a linear drain at the foot of some stone retaining wall, which is basically the same height as the grade. So there's a little cut, and there's a little cut, and there's a new drain, and there would also be gravel and foundation drains and so forth installed around this new porch, which would deal with some of that runoff down the hill.
So standing in the rear of the house and looking towards the left, that's where the drain would be in that area.
Here's the plan of the house. This is the drawing you have. If we were to turn it upside down and look at it this way.
Yes,
We're now looking at the back wall of the porch.
yes.
The drain is running along this retaining wall, cut into grade, about to this point, and then in this area right here, in front of the house, or in front of the porch, the grade will be sort of leveled up and pitched in such a way that you get positive drainage down and around the house from any surface water coming down that hill.
Okay. And so it will then drain towards the street, in other words?
As a combination of surface runoff and water in some constructed drainage, which will need to be contained on site in the spirit of the stormwater ordinance.
Okay, thank you. So, would you say a word about the retaining wall in terms of the materials that you intend to use since it will be, subject to a lot of water, potentially a lot of water coming added over the years, and so what kind of material are you intending to use?
It's as yet, there's no final decision. The preference is to make it out of what is in effect a mortar-stabilized dry stack field stone, which has some permeability and would be, its foundation would be a stabilized gravel trench rather than a large formal reinforced concrete footing.
Okay. And the current vulnerability of the porch is in terms of water damage is purely the result of water coming from the hill. It's not coming up beneath the porch. Is that correct?
It's not, in my judgment, and I'm not a hydrologist, but in my judgment, there is a certain amount of surface run down the hill, and I believe there's also some subsurface movement down the hill. And the damage to the existing porch is what the Europeans call rising damp, where water is just constantly being pulled up through the masonry and evaporating and compromising the mortar holding the masonry together.
And so is there something in your plan that is intending to try to address that, or is this a vulnerability that will continue to exist for this porch into the future?
We don't believe that it will continue to exist. We're going to build a new foundation and new footing with proper foundation drainage and damp proofing to contemporary practice, as opposed to the construction in 1960, which was much more informal and more in the nature of a kind of a patio with a cover thrown onto it. Although it does have a little sort of short knee wall of masonry, which is crumbling and coming apart because of the water.
Just one, I think just one last question, and that is, so in addition to the extended porch that's being built, I know that the plan is also for the for the patio, which is adjacent to it, also to be expanded somewhat. So is the retaining wall also going to protect the new patio, or is it just protecting the porch?
Yes, the retaining wall protects it in effect protects much of the back of the house. But it stretches the length of the patio, because that whole patio is cut into the hillside in order to bring it to a usable level. Bring it to a usable level down low enough that the wood of the house is 8, 10, or 12 inches above the newly established grade.
One other question from Mrs. Bryant. So I know that you have a walkway that leads to a side door.
Yes, sir.
With the part of your plan is to, I guess, to put some covering by that door. You're going to retain a walkway to that area. You're not having a walkway to that area.
We're not having a walkway to that area.
Okay.
I don't think it's really necessary.
Okay.
There is one there currently, but we're going to get rid of that and, do grass and plantings.
So the access to the backyard from the front would only be through your house? Is that, or is there another way? Because right now you have this sort of walkway that suggests it's a pathway to get to the backyard, or is there another way in which you see that happening?
Well, it's just walking through the yard. I mean,
Through the yard, okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Caulfield?
On the survey, the elevations, are those proposed elevations, or are those existing elevations?
On the survey or on my site plan L1?
I guess it's a survey that you might have put your elevations on that.
They are, I'm giving point elevations at the corners of the building, and those are existing elevations that were relevant to establishing the height of the building and just generally helping us keep track of how the slopes are working. The elevations that are pegged to the retaining wall and patio surface at the back are new elevations, and the elevations given right around the porch are also new elevations, because that's where the grade is being manipulated to alleviate the water problem.
Okay. So on those elevations that you discussed on the patio wall, it looks like they're on the base of the patio, from the base to the top of the wall is 4 feet? Is that what I'm reading?
It's actually, it's about 3 feet. Okay. It's 213.8, call it 214, rising to 217. So it's about 3, and then there's a middle sort of seating wall at 18 inches.
And you're going to have some stairs, was that shown there?
Pardon?
Stairs? Are those stairs there that
Yes.
are listed there?
Yes, those are stairs rising up along the front of the porch, which you can see if you were to turn to page A4, drawing 1 on A4. You can see that low terrace area stretching across the front, the middle part of the house.
Okay.
And then the wide, shallow steps rising up to the 217 grade.
So like the elevation of the porch would be 215, but then the patio would be lower than that, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
We're stepping down
Stepping
from the
down.
porch to the patio, and the new grade varies, but it comes up almost to at its highest, it comes almost up to the level of a knee wall that is visible from the inside of the porch.
Okay, and you're just using the existing grade of what's out there in order to make the patio and the stairs are going to come because of the variations of the different elevations of that area on the back?
We're cutting, there's an existing patio, which is
On the back side of the porch?
on the back side of
Yeah.
on the back side of the house, next to the porch, is relatively high. I forget what the number is. I don't have it at the top of my head, but it's right at the level of the top of the concrete foundation of the house.
Okay.
And so we're cutting that patio down into the grade a bit in order to protect the house from, going forward, from water damage and insects.
Okay. Yeah, the picture showing is like from the top of the hill, so I'm just not understanding the elevations, but that explanation does. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Church?
Yeah. My understanding is that you're gonna remove the cement foundation and put new footings in deeper
Correct.
than they are now.
We haven't dug, so I don't know how deep the footings go. I doubt they go to frost.
They don't go to frost.
I can't say for sure. We haven't dug under the existing porch to see how deep the
Okay, but
footings
you
are.
believe that by going to the frost line or below it will help alleviate the rise of water?
It would, it would help that. But mostly, I need to take it below frost line for building code reasons.
Okay, code reasons.
And,
important.
and that new foundation will be, coated with waterproofing the way that a new foundation on a house is, which will also help alleviate the water problem and keep the water from soaking into the masonry and
Water rise.
and getting the rising damp phenomenon going again. And the new footing at frost line would have foundation drainage built into it as new construction
So
typically does.
the water coming down from properties above you, if I'm correct in assuming that, is there any other way to divert that water away from the wall, or has anything been thought about drainage before it gets into the point where it's going to come through and
Well, we're handling it at different elevations in different ways.
okay?
At the low elevation, we're handling it with a long drain,
Right?
and positive slope of a terrace surface away from the house.
Okay, but
To
at the
that
higher level,
At the higher level, we're manipulating the grade so we get positive drainage away from.
okay, can you explain to me what positive drainage, what do you mean?
Positive drainage is, in the building code, when you build a new piece of building or a new house, it's written into the code that the grade shall slope away from the house 1 inch per foot for a minimum distance of 8 feet.
Okay,
And that's what that sort of tip to the grade is it helps keep the surface water running away from the
away from the
house.
foundation, okay?
In old houses, that tends to have gone away, just as, you've got 60 years of gardeners throwing mulch around, the grade gets
Gets destroyed.
changed.
Right, sure.
And half of our houses, now the water just ponds against the outside wall in many places.
Okay, so positive drainage would be, the ideal would be that it just drains away from the foundation of the house.
Taking surface water out.
Oh, that's what I
and then
mean,
it
surface
percolates
water.
out there.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Simon?
Hi. What was the reason for the extension, for the additional piece, instead of just going over the original?
We would like to make the porch a little bit wider and come forward of the end of the house so that it's a little bit larger inside and we can furnish it more generously than it has been furnishable in the past. And so that in the morning, we can get morning sunshine coming into the porch, which will just be a nice thing. Sit there with your newspaper and your
So,
coffee.
other than the sun, why couldn't you go on the other side?
Because if we look at page A1, we wanted to avoid making the screen porch larger in front of where the dining table is, and cutting the dining room off from views of the backyard and its own sunshine.
And it's what?
And its own sunshine late in the day. And the extension to the north is felt like a more reasonable way to address the porch. It's because it is staying within the other, the other stated bulk restrictions of the zoning ordinance, the 65-foot percentage width. It complies with the 18-foot side yard setback, which arguably would not comply here because it's in the rear yard, right? That entire porch is just it's in current non-compliance, and except for a small corner of it. And so it seemed like extending it to the north would not feel like an additional encroachment on the actual linear foot dimensional setback non-compliance. That angle matches the angle of the back of the lot. So
So that was my next question. So at that point, that you have like point 8, where it says, where it would be on page, item 3 on page A6, that corner of the new extension, that distance, that setback distance is the same 29.3?
yes.
Okay, so all along that wall is 29.3 to the,
Along
the new wall of the extension?
I want to make sure I'm understanding which wall you're talking about.
So on A1,
A1,
position 8, where you have note 8, that corner of the new extension,
here you're talking about.
I can't see that far. I'm looking here.
Neither can I.
But right here on A1, you have it marked as 8, and it's also highlighted as 3 over A6, which would be on page A6, that corner, the sharp corner that you have on A6.
A6 is a bit of like a detail of framing, which, but on A1, referring to like the floor plan, he's talking about the most northern.
Yeah, the northern corner that you have
Yes.
marked as the sharp corner.
And that is marked at, yes, that northern corner is number 3, sharp corner.
Yes, on
And that line is the same 29 and change to the rear
Okay.
lot line. That's what set that
Got it,
angle.
okay. Yeah, I just wanted to confirm that, okay, thank you.
Mr. Viera?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That was actually my question. You mentioned also that there's a proposed drain on the northern side of the property. Is that depicted anywhere in the drawing?
There's a drain on the uphill side, which is actually the west side of if you look at the terrace behind the house, there's a little hatched line indicating the extent of that drain, which is at elevation 213.8. Along that length.
I see. Yep. So you will continue that drain, or is there the new drain? What would it be?
Excuse me?
The new drain, because I don't see it in the drawing, so I'm just having a difficult time.
May I approach?
Yeah.
That is the drain. And that drain is at elevation 213, which is below the level of the porch. And then the porch itself has footing drains, which are below grade, and positive slope at the surface to carry the water out.
Thank you. And the next question is the proposed porch going to be conditioned? So do you need a condensing unit outside?
No.
Okay.
We have no intention or plan to do that.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Let me start with the air conditioning condenser that's now shown on the north side of the house. You're proposing to relocate that same condenser to the south side?
Actually, Mr. Sharoon kindly pointed out my error there. It can't, because
So that, yes,
it can't go in the side yard. It has to, it
That's-
gets
that's where it's
treated
going.
like an accessory. And so we're going to leave it where it is, or relocate it somewhere as of right that does not
okay, that's where I was going, because as in your plans,
Yeah.
you show it in a
Yes.
non-conforming location.
Kindly ignore that error of mine.
You have a couple new walls we haven't discussed. You have the new wall behind the addition on the west side, which I understand, so I don't think I have any. Other than, what is the height of that wall?
The one that's sort of over by the stairs, sort of uphill from the steps around the porch?
Yes.
Is that what you're pointing? That would just be something low to the grade. It's just another layer of defense against water coming down the hill. It's just
That's why I was assuming
intended
its
to sort
purpose,
of
but I was wondering it,
pitch
so
it
it's
off to the
basically
side.
built into the ground to
Yes,
divert water from flowing towards the porch.
yes.
Then you have another wall coming out of the northeast corner of the porch, which, unlike the other wall, I'm not immediately understanding the function of that wall.
That wall is allowing us to cut the grade and pull the finished grade down where the condenser is now. Because that area too is at this moment, it's up high at a place where where the groundwater threatens the wood framing of the existing house. So that's a little cut. It's just going to be ground cover and some bushes to conceal the condenser.
And then the somewhat related to that. The photo shows there's some shrubs which adjacent to the porch where the addition's going. I'm assuming those are to be removed.
Those would be removed.
And it also looks that that area, due to the mulch, is actually somewhat higher. Is that proposed to be reduced, the elevation of that reduced to, so the drainage is positive and going away from?
No, at that point, it will actually be raised very slightly to establish positive drainage. The sill of the screens in the new porch sit on top of a knee wall and don't go down so deep. So at that corner you're talking about, the grade will actually be raised a little bit.
Okay, let me do it differently. I think we're saying the same thing, but next, where the addition's going, you need to raise the grade.
A
That,
little bit, yes.
okay, but then when you go beyond that, it looks like the area where the shrub is goes beyond where the addition's going, and it would look like you would need to reduce the grade there so you get the positive drainage from the north side of the addition.
Potentially. It doesn't look like that from, it doesn't look like it would be a strong effect, but there would be
But
something.
you would have positive drainage
There-
on
yeah,
that
so
side.
that
and-
we would have positive drainage.
And just to reiterate what I believe your testimony was, with the existing porch, there's no sun in the morning. It's not until the sun swings around by midday that the porch is
You get
getting sun.
afternoon sun, but nothing in the morning, and we think it would be
And your
nice to change
goal
that.
with the addition is so you get at least a portion of the porch has sun in the morning. Is that correct?
Correct.
Any other questions from members of the board? Are there any members of the audience who have questions or statements or testimony or anything whatsoever you want to say about the application? Okay, is there anything either of you want to say before we discuss and vote on the application?
I'm good.
I think we've spoken as much as we should.
Okay, we'll start with Mr. McCulloch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm supportive of the proposal. I think the extension of the porch will add to the property and to the comfort of the occupants, and I'm pleased to see the retaining the attention given to building walls to protect from water. I'm aware of the fact that there is a wall that borders the property that belongs to the neighbor, and perhaps at some point will be repaired, which might also help to mitigate the amount of water that drains in the direction of the house itself. But I'm supportive of the proposal as we have it.
Mr. Caulfield?
Looking at the pictures, I can see that water has definitely made an impact on this property throughout the years, different types of elevations, looking at the air conditioning being so high, and so I'm in favor of what you guys are doing now. Thank you.
Mr. Church?
I'm also in favor of the application as presented.
Okay. Mr. Simon?
I'm in favor.
Mr. Vieira?
I'm also in favor of the application. I think there will be great improvements to the site. And one thing that I guess was not mentioned, but I was looking at the impervious calculation, so in general, I think the net change is a decrease in impervious coverage, so that's a good thing, so I'm in favor.
Okay, I'm also in favor, just as an entertaining sidelight. When I was a child, I was growing up near here where these houses were being built, and one of the more entertaining parts of it, this segment of Woodmont changed from Woodmont to Heller to back to Woodmont, and it was very confusing. I had friends who lived on the old section of Woodmont, and they couldn't decide which it should be, and then they finally ended up with it being Woodmont to Cornell Way. I'm in favor. I think They've justified the variance for the rear yard. This is not any closer than the existing porch. The existing porch is largely encroaching on it. It's a very small addition to the porch. I think, given the topography of the site and the desire to have the, sunlight in the morning in a portion of the porch, they've justified the reasons for putting it where, the addition where it's located. I don't think this will be a substantial impairment to the zone plan or a substantial detriment to the neighborhood. It's, you will now be able to see a little bit of the porch from the road, but barely. I think there should be two conditions. One, if they relocate the air conditioning unit, that it be located in a conforming location. And two, that they carry out the plan to remove sufficient portions of the existing impervious surface so as to not trigger the formal stormwater review. Any other discussion among board members? And if not, would someone like to make a motion?
Motion to approve the application
Is there a second? With the condition?
with the condition of the AC units.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Go have a new porch, hopefully by next spring.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Do you know where they are?
Okay, the next set.
Before you announce it, it looks like they're not present yet. I don't mean to stop you from announcing it, but what do we do?
Let me see if I can get a cell phone number here.
We should play the Jeopardy music.
Since I was 6.
What about those two houses across where they used to be a farm?
Wonder what happened. They were saying,
Those two houses. How'd that happen? They're so close.
It's a planning board application.
Or was it
I mean, that was that whole area, not the old part of Skytop, that was probably part of the farm. But when I was growing up, that was a much larger farm back there where Van Bremen, boards of Van Bremen's owned the farm. And the daughter, who is older than me, but she was a school teacher, but she kept farming it for years. But I assume when she passed away that they sold it and then got the subdivision.
But the planning board.
Yeah. How long did they think they were going to take on these? Yes.
Possibly, anybody that asks you that, it can be random, you have to, like, that your application, you had a
Do you know, there's a mailbox for the Department of Finance?
Well,
Are you ready to proceed?
we'll
His
proceed.
absence at the moment?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
The next application is that of RealPropTaxCert LLC. It's an application for variances related to the construction of a proposed driveway and parking located at 26 Lexington Avenue. The property is in the R2 two-family zone and is designated on the township tax maps as Lot 36 and Block 3004. A proposed driveway on the westerly side of the dwelling leading to proposed parking area for 2 vehicles in the rear yard requires variances from Montclair Code Section 347-102C for a driveway width of less than 10 feet and from Montclair Code Section 347-104 for a driveway setback of less than 1 foot from the westerly side property line. The applicant has also presented an alternate plan for parking in the front yard, which would require variances from Montclair Code Section 347-52, which does not permit parking areas to be located in the front yard, and from Montclair Code Section 347-104 for a parking setback of less than 4 feet from the westerly side property line. Is the notice in order and are taxes paid?
Yes, property taxes are current, and affidavit of service was received for the mailing of the notice, and proof of publication of the notice was also received.
Are you both going to testify?
Yes,
Okay, so would you both raise your right hands so you swear to tell the truth in the matter pending before the board?
yes.
Yes, sir.
State your names and addresses.
Merrill O'Brien, 160 Park Street, Montclair, New Jersey.
And Terry Thornton, same address.
Okay, and Mr. Sharoon, would you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth in the matter pending before the board?
Yes, I do.
State your name and position with the township.
Richard Sharoon, planning technician and zoning officer in the planning department.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Marin, our architect, is expected shortly, so he can fill in where I leave blanks, as can my partner, Terry Thornton. We obtained this property through a tax sale certificate and eventually got title and proceeded to get approvals for the construction that we got about 95% through when we found out that we had a dispute as to the length of the shared driveway that originally existed. We were not able to resolve that dispute, and our neighbor at 28 Lexington went ahead and took down part of their porch and have installed their own separate driveway. That's necessitated us applying to either get front yard parking or a driveway on the west side of 28 Lexington. I'm sorry, 26 Lexington, the subject property. That's the reason we're here tonight. I'll let Mr. Steck talk to the planning issues, but this is really either with front yard or rear yard parking is the only way we can comply with the town ordinance, which requires off-street parking. This was not our first choice, but this is where we are, and we believe that it's consistent with the plan of the area and consistent with the aesthetics as the historical committee agreed. So with that, I think we'll just let Mr. Steck take the show and get on with it. Thank you. Unless there's any questions.
Mr. Steck, would you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth in the matter pending before the board?
I do.
State your name and address.
Peter Steck, S-T-E-C-K, 80 Maplewood Avenue, Maplewood, New Jersey.
Thank you.
I'm still a licensed planner in New Jersey, and I've appeared here before and been accepted as an expert planning witness.
We accept you as an expert
Okay.
planner.
I'll go through some slides shortly, and the board has hard copies of it. But this is
Mr. Steck, why don't we just mark that as Exhibit A1, if you don't mind?
I don't mind. A1 is a series of 5 pages, and I guess it's probably makes sense for me to just run through them. The first page has a portion of the tax maps, the zoning map, and on the upper right-hand corner, It shows the subject property in the midst of being renovated. And that's P1 on the upper right-hand side. The second page shows the property and the adjacent property. So upper left in red is a multifamily house, non-conforming, which is the side that we want to instruct the driveway on. On the right-hand side shows the neighbors to the right constructing their driveway. So there was a shared driveway. This needed some variances that were before this board because if you recall, there were dormers added to the half-story, which turned it into a 3-story building, required variances. One of the conditions of that variance is that an easement be secured for the shared driveway. It turns out that that condition fell apart. The matter happened to be litigated, and the owners of this property can no longer rely on that shared driveway. That shared driveway was going to go to the rear of the property and have 2 parking spaces. Thank you. The new driveway being constructed is shown on the upper right-hand side. That house had to take down a part of the porch in front in order to accommodate the driveway. It's a long and narrow lot, as you can see on the lower right-hand side. It's only 40 feet wide, and the adjacent lots are developed. To the right is a house, again, that has now the full driveway on its property. The left-hand side in the red is a multifamily non-conforming house. To the lower left is a view from the rear yard looking toward the house. So that's where the new parking area will be. The next page, kind of details the variances that we're seeking. So on the right-hand side, you can see in order to get some chance of getting a driveway to the rear, the existing porch had to be removed. So upper right-hand corner is where it is today, and unfortunately, after the renovation, that has to be modified. That did go before the Historic Commission as a courtesy review, and they endorsed the changes, recognizing that without the removal of part of the porch, the only place to put parking would be in the front yard. On the left-hand side, you see the portion of the driveway that is going to have a 0-foot setback from the adjacent property. The code requires a 1-foot setback to that paved area. At its narrowest point, the driveway is 8 feet in width. I note parenthetically that that's less than the 10 feet width required in the zoning ordinance, but that's the only land we have, even with the removal of part of the porch. I note parenthetically that your code does allow 8-foot wide compact parking spaces. Average cars are about 5.8 feet wide. My car is a Volvo with 5.6 feet wide. So even though it's a substandard width of 8 feet, it can accommodate most vehicles without a problem. The next page simply shows an aerial view. On the upper side shows on our side of Lexington, and on the lower side it shows the reverse. And what this is intended to show is that there are a lot of green front yards, and on the alternative of needing a variance to put a driveway to park in the back versus parking on the front lawn, it is hands down superior to grant the variance to allow parking in the rear. So, just running through some proofs here. This is an irregular lot. It's substandard in width. And parking was already approved for the rear yard with a substandard width because it was a shared driveway. This street does have some properties that have parking in the front. I don't know if they went to the Board of Adjustment and it's more down toward the Maple end of things, but there are some homes that have some parking in the front. There's only one home that's an interior lot that has a garage part of the house with the garage door facing the street. So the character of the area is older homes without attached garages. Many homes don't have garages at all, but basically parking is in the driveway. In many cases, there's sufficient space behind the home, as in the case here, to have the parking. Your master plan was last amended in 2023. Among the goals in it, it talked about maintaining the scale and character inherent in the diverse and historic neighborhoods of the township. One of the objectives, Objective 12, was to promote and protect existing residential character and form in established neighborhoods. We need variances. Our preference is to have the narrow driveway and parking in the rear. So the relief we need is a driveway less than 10 feet wide and a setback of 0 feet for a portion of the driveway till we get to the back of the house, and then we're going to angle in and have a 1 foot setback in that rear portion. And have 2 parking spaces in the rear. This is, you can look at this as either a C1 or C2 variance. In terms of hardship, C1, certainly we have an existing house that we are reducing in width, but we have a lot that's only 40 feet wide, and the adjacent lots are already developed, so it's not possible to make this a wider property. The applicant had hoped to rely on the shared driveway. It turns out that matter was litigated, and the applicant does not have the ability to use the shared driveway, and that side distance is insufficient for a car. So the only alternative is build a driveway on the left-hand side as you face the building, or park in the front yard. Clearly, the better alternative, in my opinion, is to have the driveway and park in the rear. So although there's certainly a hardship basis to offer this, in my opinion, there is a benefit under a C2 variance in terms of aesthetics. Most of the houses in the immediate area have green front lawns, and while people do park their cars in the driveway and they're physically in the front yard, they have the ability to park on the side of the house or in the rear in most instances. So to preserve the character of this part of Lexington, it's, I think, paramount to be able to park cars in the rear. So that's a C2 variance. Purpose G talks about, of the municipal land use law, talks about providing sufficient space in an appropriate location for different uses. Here we want to put the parking in the rear, which is where it should be in this older neighborhood. And Purpose I talks about promoting a desirable visual environment. In terms of the negative criterion, this is a functioning driveway. At its narrowest point is 8 feet wide. The average car width is 5.8 feet. So it can physically be accommodated. Even the largest trucks that someone might have is only maybe 7.5 feet wide. So you can get a vehicle back there. If you're going by the house with a larger vehicle, you may not be able to open the door on one side because it's only 8 feet wide, but it certainly is enough room to get an average passenger vehicle to the rear. So in summary, I think that there are at least, there is a classic hardship situation because of the existing dwelling, and the applicant is going to extraordinary lengths by taking down part of the porch and reconstructing it. But because it's only 40 feet wide and an existing dwelling, that is a hardship and presents practical difficulties. An equally strong argument is the C2 argument, where the public benefits of aesthetics substantially outweigh the detriments. And because the master plan was concerned about development fitting into the established theme of the neighborhood, that's what this does. This alternative advances that purpose. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in terms of the intended new driveway, there is considerable vegetation that runs between the two properties. How much of that is belonging to this lot, and how much of it is belonging to the other lot?
The applicant can comment on that, but most of that, there's some smaller brush, but I would say that most of it, in my view, is on the adjacent property. There are no, I don't believe there are any substantial trees that have to be taken down to accommodate this driveway.
No, I can address that. If you look at the proposed site plan submission, that was part of the Smith-Marin submission. All that vegetation is on the neighbor's property. There are 0 trees that will be removed or affected from our property line to the house. There's one substantial tree in the backyard that is the property line goes right through the middle, but it's in a portion where it's either just beyond the parking pads, or the parking pads will set back to allow that tree to stand. That tree will not be impacted. So there are no trees that are impacted by the proposed plan.
So there's no dispute with the neighbor as far as the concept of the driveway?
Not with the neighbor on that side.
On that side.
Nothing that's been brought to our attention by that neighbor.
But there are a couple of trees that are on their property where the branches overlap.
But there's sufficient headroom. There's you don't have to duck to get under any of that. Yeah.
And the reason why I'm asking that particular question is because, Mr. Steck, you mentioned a truck being able to access, and I think your reference is primarily to service vehicles that may need to go into the property from time to time. What about for like a fire engine? Would a fire engine be able to?
Well, a fire engine would never go down that driveway. Okay. They would never put a fire truck at jeopardy. They would stay on the street.
On either side?
Correct. I mean, physically, I suppose if there was something huge happening in the back, well, first of all, my understanding is they would never take a fire truck onto the property there because it's easy length from a hose, and they wouldn't want to put the truck near that close to a fire.
Okay. You mentioned also that with the 10-foot width, now we do have the bay window that extends out and another bump out. So in terms of those two structures as part of the house, those would not be an impediment to vehicles going?
I understand, because the height of the bay window, that's not an issue.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the bay window, I think it's shown on one of the drawings. Mm-hmm. The bay window, the bottom of the extension from the bay window will be raised so that there will be 7 feet of clearance. And from the research of looking at the height of even, say, a minivan, that's like 5 feet and a half, 6 feet. So that will provide ample clearance.
So the bay window there will be some reconstruction of the bay window, is what you're saying?
Correct. That will be the bottom part will be removed, and it'll be then the extension, just this is, excuse me, the side of the house will be uniform.
That's quite all right. Take your time. It's okay.
Excuse me.
That's all right.
I want to put your minds at ease, I'm not sick. I have vocal cord medical condition that's spasming right now.
We can go to someone else and we can circle back. So, so on this property, the current porch then is going to be modified.
Correct. So as you can see on the right-hand side of P3, upper is the current configuration. And again, the applicants are trying to make the result of truncating the porch as symmetrical as possible. The architect may be able to comment on that, but that has been before the Historic Commission for an advisory opinion, and they are comfortable with the changes.
All right.
Okay, why don't we swear Mr. Marin in, have him give his credentials so he can qualify as an expert, so if there are questions that he is better suited to answer, we can do that.
Okay, would you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth in the matter pending before the board?
I do.
Name and address?
Eric Marin, 6 South Fullerton Avenue, Montclair.
Mr. Marin, you're a registered architect in the state of New Jersey, is that correct?
I am.
Okay.
Just get close to a microphone so we can all hear you.
Yep.
So, Mr. Marin, while I'm on this topic then of the porch,
Yes.
would you explain to the board how you are looking at the redesign of that porch in terms of where you're going to be diminishing the scale of it and the posts in order to support it on the driveway side of the property?
Well, it might be better. I could just walk up to the...
Of course.
the screen.
There's a handheld microphone here somewhere. I can use that. Give it a tap for him. Okay.
So the existing elevation, the conditions on each side of the porch where that roof slopes back to the house are symmetrical. We're retaining that. Essentially, we're shrinking the porch, retaining that symmetrical condition on either side, moving that column over. We looked at a couple of different column arrangements. This seemed to be the most sensible, both aesthetically and structurally. So the appearance of the porch will be very similar, except just sort of, it's as if we took a slice out of it right here and pushed it over.
So where currently there is a post that sits in front of the window, that post is being moved to the corner, is that correct?
Yeah, we're basically taking one of these columns out.
Right.
And putting it at the new corner, which will be aligned essentially forward of this corner of the house.
Okay, and so that will not affect the integrity of the roof?
No.
Okay.
No, I mean, we're gonna be, reframing,
Mhm.
cutting it back, but at least 30. Don't worry about that.
Okay, thank you. No more questions for you. Mr. Steck, would you say a little bit about the intent then, where the driveway, what was the shared driveway? And the intent is now, because of the renovations, we'll just put it nicely, the renovations that the neighbor has enacted now means that what was a portion of that shared driveway will be removed, and grass will be laid.
That's correct. We're going to
and-
remove what was the pavement on our side of the property line and return that to grass.
Okay. And what about going out to the street?
I'll hand off. Do you include the apron, and are you making any changes to this apron in the street?
Yeah, we would do that, because it would look odd to have an apron that doesn't attach to the driveway, so we would landscape to the road curb.
So where the apron is currently exists, you would change that to grass, or
Yes.
that's the intent?
Yes.
And then you'd be obviously putting a new apron in front of the new driveway.
That's correct.
How would the relocation of that apron, just sort of given where the house sits on Lexington, and then there's, of course, I think a cross street, so there is sort of a T-shape sort of traffic flow. How do you see that impacting?
Actually, it's a better location to have it straight at the intersection rather than offset. If you were going to add another street here, you would never want to offset it with that. So I think it's a better location. And the adjacent, the red house, which is a non-conforming multifamily, that has its driveway on the other side of that house, so we're not coming close to that.
And then the intent is for there to be parking for two vehicles to the back, to the rear of the house.
That's
And-
correct.
And there would be sufficient space for the vehicles to turn so that they would be able to exit the property moving forward as opposed to backing out.
That's correct.
All right. Thank you.
Mr. Caulfield?
Just a couple of questions. The houses to the left and the right of us are 80-foot frontages. So our house at one point was probably owned by one company, or it was 80, then was subdivided to make two different lots. Throughout the history of this property, I would imagine that there would have been a common driveway that was put between those two properties. Did we explore all the common driveway aspects of this house, of the property, title searches and all that stuff?
Yes, then that historical history was laid out in the complaint in the Chancery action, and the Chancery Court judge had those facts before him, but nonetheless concluded that the driveway was a matter of consent by the two property owners, and if a property owner wants to change their mind on the length of it or the size or the location, they're free to do that, and that's what our neighbors have done.
The house to the left of us, the red house, did we explore, I mean, they have a long driveway and it backs up to they have a giant parking lot, it kind of backs up into us. Did we explore maybe working with them to drive our cars through there, to come across and park in the back of ours?
Do that?
Sure.
Yeah. I have personally had conversations with that owner. That property was the subject of zoning variances in 2022, in which its own parking was changed somewhat. I don't have in my memory all the details, but I do know that there are requirements to add and reconfigure its own parking just to meet the needs of the units and the expanded units it would have. And it required variances in order to do this extension that it wants to do. We did approach that owner with the possibility of getting an easement to have a driveway extend onto that property, or to purchase a strip that would enable a better functioning driveway. And that was not something he was interested in doing at all.
If you look at A1, the first page, in the upper right-hand corner, you see a Google Earth photo, and that red building has parking that, heads into our property. So you would have to redesign their parking area in order to try to get access to the rear of our property.
Maybe we give them a space, work something out in that direction.
And as we've just learned, it's nice to own your own driveway as opposed to share it.
It's nice to have a driveway, is the question. We don't have a driveway. Let me ask you another question. What about asking the town to give you permits to park on the street for your residents? This is a single-family house, or is it going to be a multifamily house?
The plan is to rent it as a single-family home.
What about it walking through the town and asking that we get special permits to park on the street?
We haven't done that, but I have followed over the years, we live in Montclair, some of the issues in various neighborhoods about parking on the street, and there's never, to my knowledge, been anyone granted on-street parking in areas that are covered by the overnight prohibition. So it's frankly never occurred to me to do that. It's not something I've ever heard of.
And there are issues of plowing the street. I mean, it's clearly for security
Mr. Stack,
reasons.
what about using the old driveway, extend it to 8 feet, and do tandem parking on that side? Instead of
the old driveway isn't wide enough anymore.
But take the old driveway, extend it out to 8, and then do tandem parking and park in the front for them.
But, well, that's physically possible, except, in my opinion, it is a terrible solution to accommodate only parking on the front lawn. I think that's not the character of the neighborhood, and because the ordinance specifically prohibits that, it would incur a variance, which I think is a worse alternative.
But, I think like extending a huge macadam driveway in this day of global warming and all that stuff is kind of not a great thing either, right?
Well, except that we have a very deep lot. It's 208 feet. There's a lot of room to do that there and still have green space there. So again, it's a balance of considerations. In my judgment, looking at what the master plan was aiming for and the character of the neighborhood, in my mind, it's a clear trade-off to allow parking in the rear yard. And indeed, the prior application, where we were going to rely on the shared driveway, you already approved parking in the rear yard. That was the solution that was proposed at that time. It's just that we can't implement it.
Correct, because yes, exactly.
Because we lost the right to have the shared driveway.
Yeah.
Excuse me, and we will be restoring a lot of the macadam on the east side of the house. That'll be restored to grass.
Yeah, I mean, I have a driveway too, but most of my cars would be parked just like that, tandem, back to back, and then sitting in the front yard, which is most of Montclair, unfortunately. I mean, as much as we like to take our cars to the back into these garages, it just doesn't happen. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Church?
No question.
Mr. Simon?
You mentioned, I'm not sure who, but you mentioned there were other properties that had parking in the front. Do you know which address and how far away they were?
If you'll look at the first page of my exhibit, lots, I have notes here. There's only one house that has a garage that's attached and facing forward, and that's lot 34. If you go down to Maple, lot 26 has parking that kind of stops at the front of the house, and lot, I believe, 29 also has that. And it may have been people that simply, expanded their driveways over time to accommodate it. I'm not sure it's been an authorized way to do it. But as you get toward our property of Lexington, everyone has pretty much the opportunity to drive on a driveway and at least get to the side of their house.
So the only two properties with front yard parking are
I would say there are
26 and
three
29.
properties on our side of the street that have front yard parking that the pavement doesn't extend to the side yard. You have to, and again, I suspect that in some cases,
I just want to know what is, just those three properties?
Yeah, that's the only three I know.
Okay. Are those new constructions or existing?
No, they're older homes, and again, I'm not sure if they secured permission to widen their driveways to have parking at the front.
And anything on the opposite side of the street?
There may be one down toward Maple, but I drove it a second time this evening, and Except for the corner lots, which is a different situation, on the interior lots, I can't remember of another instance, maybe one, where a car is confined to park in the front yard.
But any that you recall are all south of Irving Street, between Irving.
Yes, and in fact, the best rendition is that fourth page of the exhibit. You can see on our side of the street, it's pretty much nice green lawns in the front.
Okay. That's it. Thank you.
Mr. Fiera?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess a couple of questions. In addition to the covered porch, are there any other changes to that area? Because I see the AC unit, that will be moved, correct?
Yeah, so there's the porch, there's the AC units, there's also, oh, right. There's the Bilco door along that side, and that's going to be removed. The AC units will be moved to the east, the northeast corner. And there's a bump out on the west side of the house that will be raised, just to create a little bit more clearance. So those are the changes.
Okay. And as far as the cellar door, so you have the old doors, there will be no access to the basement, is that
We're
correct?
eliminating the access to the basement.
And there will be no additional access open anywhere else in the, an external access will be added, or that's completely eliminated?
That's eliminated.
Yeah.
That's eliminated. My understanding was unless there's a bedroom in the basement, there isn't a mandate for a separate doorway, or entrance and egress and ingress. That's not a bedroom.
Okay.
Yeah, we
Is it a
could have
finished
relocated it, we just elected not to.
Is it a finished basement?
It's a laundry room with a rec room, a finished basement, yes.
But no living area, no...
No sleeping quarters?
No,
bedrooms?
no kitchen, no sleeping quarters. It
What
has
about,
a utility room, laundry room, and then.
Is there like a living room area or TV room or anything?
Interior access to
Well, I mean,
Of
it's.
course,
it's-
yes.
I'm assuming it'll be a playroom of some sort, but there's nothing built into it right now.
And there'll be an interior stair, of course, that goes to the basement.
An interior stair, yeah.
And there are windows, not full-size windows, but there are windows on the other side of the house.
So that was where I was going, like, would you need to adjust the window size to give an extra exit point if you're eliminating the doors?
If
Not-
there are no,
not
if
by code.
there are no
Oh.
code-required bedrooms that are in the basement, so there's no code-required egress.
Sorry to jump
Yeah,
on.
no, that was a good question. I guess the other question was regarding the impervious surfaces. Was there any calculation done as far as net positive, or we're adding more in balance, we're adding more asphalt than we are adding grass to
Yeah.
offset the additional asphalt?
So the allowable impervious coverage is 55%, and the new calculation is 41%.
55 allowable
Is
and
allowable,
41.
41 actual.
Okay, all right, thank you, that's all.
Just on the air conditioning units, you're moving them where now?
So it's the northeast corner. If you look at the lower plan on the first page, sort of to the south of that deck. Hard to see from here. It's just to the south of that deck.
Pointing to the right side rear corner of the house, there's a concrete pad there for, next to the deck.
I see.
Yeah, that's a compliant location.
And that will have no impact on the neighbor?
It's actually being returned to the original location where they had been previously approved. We've moved them to the other side just to make a better access point. So we'll have to return them to where they were originally approved.
Thank you.
Mr. Church?
Yeah, I've got a question. Is the property now empty, or is somebody living in it?
The property's not yet been rented. There is a friend of ours who's just returned to Montclair who's been staying there for the last couple of weeks until he rents his own apartment.
Okay,
in
so
the next
you're the
few weeks.
rentor.
Excuse me?
You're renting this place?
No, no, no. He's a guest. It's not being rented. And it's
So
strictly-
neither one of you live there?
No, we live elsewhere in Montclair. Our hope is, after renting a few years, one of our daughters uses it as an opportunity to return to Montclair, but our plan is to initially rent it as a single-family home.
Okay.
Can we take 1 minute? My wife just called, and she knows where I am, and she never calls, and I'm slightly concerned, so
Sure, we'll
this
pause.
should just take a minute.
Okay.
I'll start the architectural questions. So there's something on your plans that's referred to as, that's behind the porch that's referred to as an overhang, but both looking at the pictures I was out there, behind the porch there's a structure that is clearly not something a car can drive under, and not understanding what's becoming of that.
Can you point me to
On the
com-
plans, it's labeled as an overhang.
Okay, I
But when
see
you
it.
look at the porch, when you're facing the porch,
Right.
behind the portion of the porch that sticks out from the house, there's a portion of the house that sticks out that's relatively close to the ground. If on page 5 of Mr. Sharon, of the planning memo, you can see it from the rear.
Yep. And that's why we're raising it. That's why we're raising it. It's a walkout on the inside of the house so the floor extends. Instead, we're raising the sill so it becomes a window that projects.
No, I'm not talking about the bay window. I understand what you're doing with that.
It's-
This is immediately behind the porch.
Yeah, it's called an overhang, right? It's a rectangular space as
Yes.
opposed to the bay window.
Yes.
Yes. That's being raised.
That currently reaches the ground.
It actually doesn't.
It's a couple feet off the ground,
okay.
but it is,
It will be, it's a walkout right now, and it will be raised to a window to create clearance. So, oops.
I think Mr. Steck's exhibit showed that, right, on the profile of that
So
exhibit?
on page,
It's not easily, on page P3, it's in yellow, but it's hard to see that if you look at the middle diagram, you'll see a rectangular feature and then a bay feature. That's what's being discussed.
So if you look at the elevations on page A201 of the architecturals, and you look at the bottom elevation B west, you'll find drawing of that. Reference. So this is the element as it exists in the upper elevation, and in the lower elevation you can see it's much smaller. And so we've raised the sill to create clearance. So it's essentially now more like a bay, it's a square, it's a rectangular bay window now, as opposed to walkout.
So that whole, probably 5 feet is being cut off, and you're going to put a floor there and a window where it's a solid wall now.
Right, we're raising it, so it's just a window, but it's still projected, but it's a window, you can't walk in there.
Sure.
I'm going to, you can mark my computer if you like, but you can pass this around, but those are the features that you're talking about.
Right, yes.
I don't know if you want to.
No, it's in the picture.
Okay, then the columns which were already asked about, there are currently 3 columns on the left side of the steps as you're facing the house. Well, there are 4, but I'm just...
4 total, 3 on the
4
left.
total, but
Yep.
3 across the
Sure.
front. Are there still going to be 3 across the front, or just 2?
On the left of the door, there'll be just 2.
Okay, so there'll be 1 at the corner of the house, and,
On the right-hand side, the one will remain, the one to the left of the door will remain, and then the one at the far corner, on the far left, will move in.
okay, let me try that again. On that side that currently has 3 columns across the front, will there be 2 or 3?
Okay, so you're actually, it looks like you're talking about the side of the house.
No, I'm talking about the front of the house.
Well, it's shown right there.
Okay. Let me, this one.
We'll give you a microphone
Your
again, Eric.
picture that was submitted with the application is what most clearly shows it. 1, 2, 3.
Let's call it 4, because there are 4.
There's a 4th behind.
Let's just, no, it's 4 across the front.
Okay.
Now there'll be 3 across the front.
Okay. Okay. So where will the 3, 2 will stay in the same place?
Right.
And what will happen with the one that's furthest west?
Right, so I'm just going to use this because we can see before and after quite clearly. I can walk over there as well, this is closer. Thank you. So here are the 4 columns on the front facade. And these 2 remain on either side of the door, in the elevation below. This is a new column.
Right, you're eliminating the 2 that are furthest west and replacing with 1 at the corner.
That's right.
Okay. And then the column that is now at the rear of the porch, is
Side
that
view.
that's being eliminated? Is there anything, or it's just the porch will be attached to the wall of the house?
Right, it's going to be attached to the wall. So the structure will go, that's why, you're right. So on that facade, side facade, you're eliminating 2 columns. These 2 columns will go away because this structure will tie into the side.
I'm moving on to Mr. Steck and maybe the applicant. Well, let me start. The survey shows that the shared driveway did not go, that the parking seemed to have all been on the neighbor's property, not on this lot.
let's see, the approval was to use the shared driveway and then to extend into the rear yard on our property and have 2 spaces plus a turning space. So it was the opposite of what's being proposed.
I understand that. But the parking to the rear that was approved, that was new parking.
Correct.
Okay, it was,
Well, let me say that I wasn't there prior to the dispute with the driveway, so I don't know where the parking was originally when you purchased the property. I suspect it was in the rear yard.
There was no paving in the back of our property.
okay, that's what the survey shows.
Correct.
Driveway went back, and if you were parking behind the neighbor's house.
Correct.
Or on the dirt behind our house.
Right. And the variance we granted for this property required there be an easement because there wasn't one at that point.
That was a condition of approval in the
Right.
resolution.
Right, okay. You approached the neighboring property owner and he said drop dead and not so many, and effectively, and was not willing to enter the easement, and instead went to court?
No. When we were at the prior hearing before this board, the approval was voted on and succeeded, and then a board member came up to us and said, you really should consider getting an easement agreement. And we said, thank you very much. We didn't read the actual resolution. We never received it. I've since found out it's available online. I'm not saying that's an excuse, but we kept using the backyard for access with contractors, and the history. We got the history of the property. There was we understood a shared driveway agreement for quite some time. The neighbor, after we had developed the property to the point where a mudroom in the back was replaced, determined that the neighbor only wanted to allow the sharing to go to 91 feet. We have an architect's report saying that 99 feet is what was required for the prior owner to clear the mudroom as it existed, and that the construction that was approved by the board required the same 99 feet. So we have and I have a copy here, I can hand it up. Okay. Anyway, the architect concluded that there was no additional footage required to get to the rear yard parking on our property. The neighbor saw it differently. We couldn't agree. We were close to agreement to the point where we asked Mr. Pronesti, the surveyor, to draft something that would be attached to a written filed agreement. And then neighbor said, no, we only want to allow 91 feet. The 91 feet cut us off at a point that only left a little over 7 feet access. And then they went ahead on their own and put up a fence to the 91 feet. So we only had seven and maybe a quarter foot of clearance to access the rear yard of 26 Lex. We thought that there was an implied easement agreement. We never thought that the neighbor would actually take down part of their porch to develop their own driveway, which incidentally they've done without the 1 foot setback. But we didn't think it would.
Asking them about that, but go on.
We didn't think it would get to that point, so our neighbor at 28 originally believed that they had a right to use the shared driveway to access their rear property to the 91-foot point where they could turn off into their backyard because of their property didn't
Go back as far as yours does.
Exactly, thank you. And we tried everything. We actually put up a post in the middle to emphasize that, no, it's both shared, both properties need to share it for it to work. And that didn't convince them, and we filed an action to get, because we were told that we could never get front yard parking unless you jump through every hoop. And every hoop means litigating, means self-help, and the court found that it was a revocable agreement. There was an admission in court that there was 25 years of a shared driveway agreement with our predecessor title owner. But it's not recorded, and it's revocable. So after we got that decision, we made this application.
So why didn't next door require a variance for the driveway?
Well, on their survey map with the porch removal, the foundation of their home, you can actually, you can't see it on these documents, but we have their survey upstairs. To the foundation of 28 Lexington minus the porch, there's 11 feet available. So on a plan that provided the 10-foot width and the 1-foot setback, 11 feet total. Unlike this property where the foundation of the house, not.
I understand.
Yeah, got the numbers, okay.
I'm on the neighbor, and there's
Yeah.
a purpose that
They
will
have
relate
more-
to this.
Yeah.
But
They have 3 more feet
Okay.
available to them. Yeah.
But what was built does not conform.
That's what the indication he's made. It hasn't been, I guess, inspected for that purpose. It can be. It will be, I suppose.
We're not objecting.
Yeah, we're not filing a complaint.
I'm where I have
Okay.
gotten all the answers I need. I'm not going to make some people happy, but that's a different issue. And my understanding of the applicant's testimony, there's a large tree at the rear of the property where, approximately where the driveway's ending, and you think you'll be able to save that tree and not have to go back as far as where that tree's located?
Oh, there's no question, we're not going to interfere with that tree. And there's space, it's far enough back, there's space to pull over, and that tree will remain.
Any other questions from members of the board? Okay, are there members of the audience who have questions, statements, anything you want to say about the application? This is your opportunity. Okay. Anything further you wish to add before we discuss and vote?
Just one thing. If the commission agrees to, board agrees to approve the application, I know we would love to proceed with modifications to the home before it gets cold. So we would just ask, if you were to approve the application, whether we could proceed without, say, stormwater, whether you'd have any objection. We're going to proceed, we would proceed with stormwater management plan as we would need to and get that approved, but we were just wondering if you would have any objection to modifying construction.
I'm not understanding what you're asking. Proceed with construction of what?
I don't think modifying the house has anything to do with the variances.
Right, if all he's asking
I
about,
don't think so either, but Richard could tell us, might tell us
Well,
differently.
I would just, I guess to address what you're saying, I suppose, should this plan, either plan, I suppose, be approved, it should be conditioned upon it would require a stormwater plan designed by an engineer. So that would be really part of permitting. It would be sent to the board's engineer, so I guess that's like a phase 2. I think that's what you were, I think you were essentially agreeing that, seeing that road ahead, that's part of execution.
I think our concern was that while the several weeks are taken to do the stormwater drainage based on whatever driveway might
That
be
the house
approved,
could be worked on.
that we can proceed.
there's no reason
with
you
our
can't work
building
on the
permit.
house.
Yeah, I think the answer to that is yes. You can progress in phases with the job as one thing is happening, the other parts, like the parts of the structure, which takes work, that would proceed in overlapping, yeah.
Thank you. It's helpful.
Start discussion, Mr. Caulfield.
As a, as a young kid, I'm a surveyor. My parents, my dad's a surveyor. I've been in the business forever. Deed by prescription, common driveways, not in the deed is something that I've dealt with all the time on surveys, just throwing the common driveway aspect of it. But then having a judge just throw it out as just, between the two parties that don't, it just like kind of ruins my entire understanding of, all this real estate law and all this, surveying and what is ownership and what is not. That being said, we have a house that, needs a driveway. Town has, we can't park it between 2 and 6. I don't know what the answer is. I'm going to listen to see what people say. Thank you.
Mr. Church.
Yeah, looking at the proposed plan, it really, I have a problem with it. I think that you're squeezing things in that really, I think the only answer at the time was probably a shared driveway. But that being off the table and not being reintroduced, I don't believe that the transfer of the driveway to 8 feet on the other side is an adequate answer in my estimation. I think that the property is just one of the properties that is in a very bad situation as far as parking goes, which is a situation shared by many people in town that don't have driveways at all or anything they can convert to a driveway. The alternative of parking in front is off the table, in my mind. That would never happen in my mind. The making of an 8-foot driveway down the side and removal of the porch is a monumental adjustment to a very lovely house, I think, in both houses in question. So at this point, I am not ready to sign off on this application. So I would have to vote no.
Mr. Simon.
It's more of a question to the board. So, Jay, are you saying that if this does not get approved, that they have no parking at all?
Yeah. I mean, it seems to me, if it doesn't get approved, then they're just in a bad spot. I mean, it's just, unless, there's not much they can do.
But if the original plan was designed with off-street parking in place, and now we're denying that.
Well, I don't think we're denying it. I think that the off-street parking was allowed because of the agreement of the shared driveway.
Yeah, but since that's not.
And now that's
the
off the
case,
table. Now, I don't know, it stumps me. It really
because
does.
I'm thinking from a legal perspective, if they proceed with their project based on the fact that we approve off-street parking, and now we're effectively not approving it, do they have any recourse in that regard?
Well, let's see what actions they take first.
Okay.
Look at, the applicant said that they have a hardship here based on circumstances that were beyond their control with respect to the shared driveway easement, which didn't exist. I guess it was just a parking agreement that the judge ultimately found could be voided or by one of the property owners, which is a terrible arrangement. That's why the board asked for, required an easement. The property owner cannot access the rear now based on that side of the property. They have two alternatives that they've presented to you. One is parking in the front yard. We know historically how the board has treated those. And the only other alternative is the driveway on the other side, which requires relief. You've heard Mr. Steck address that under C1 and C2, he believes that the board can approve those variances, and that's what you're going to weigh right here.
Yeah, okay. So under those conditions, I believe they demonstrated a hardship and obviously tried alternatives and are going through considerable renovations to make this project work. So I would vote in favor.
Mr. Vieira?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm also, this is a difficult application, but I believe the alternative definitely is off the table based on the precedent of this board, parking in the front lawn. So for that reason, I will be supportive of the proposal to add the driveway to the left of the property.
Mr. McCullough?
I have to get Mr. Caulfield's comments out of my head. So, but I mean, I do agree that a hardship has been demonstrated in this case. I mean, it's you know, based on what I think I'm able to see. I didn't really pay much attention to it when I sort of spent some time on Lexington, but it looks like between 26 and 28 may very well have been the only shared driveway. Is that about right?
On the block?
Yeah, at least on that side of the street.
No, there's about 5-6 houses over, which are, again,
There is another
40-foot
situation like that?
lots. There's a shared driveway up the middle.
Okay, which is not entirely uncommon in Montclair. It's just that, you know, I hadn't really noticed that on this particular street. It's unfortunate that the situation has developed where a dispute has resulted in what could potentially have been the best solution is not available. It's not available. And I don't know that there would even be an option for the owner of property 24 to be willing to sell a portion of their land that would allow 26 to have more space to put the driveway. I mean, if that was something that could have been negotiated, that would have been an option as well. But I didn't hear anything that suggested that. Yes, Mr. Stein.
If I could make a comment, since that's a non-conforming use, taking some of their property would be an intensification of they would need a use variance before this board if we were to acquire some of their property.
Mhm.
So it
it
seems to be going in the wrong direction.
Right,
Yes.
right. So, I mean, there just aren't good alternatives. I mean, that's what it comes down to. So, I mean, I think with that said, there has to be a solution, and the only solution, from what I can tell, has to be this imperfect solution, which is the driveway, to allow the driveway to be placed in. And so I think I would reluctantly be supportive of it.
Okay. I'm also in favor of the application. I think, you know, we've dealt with a variety of different parking situations. We have almost always, not always, there have been a couple situations but we've denied front yard parking. And I think here, that would be, as the Historic Preservation Commission pointed out, would be grossly inappropriate to the neighborhood. I mean, it's something that's not common in the area, not non-existent, but basically you drive down Lexington Avenue, you see houses with front lawns and driveway on one side. I think, you know, obvious solution here would have been the shared driveway. Like Mr. Caulfield, I am puzzled by the court's decision. It may have been, although that's not how they're characterizing it, but it may have been at least partially a function of the shared driveway did not go to the backyard of this property, and that may have colored the court's decision, saying, well, it curved, at the back of this house, curved onto the neighbor's property, and saying, even if there's a shared driveway, it doesn't get you where you want to go, which I guess is what the neighbor was doing with the 91 feet. It didn't get you fully back to your backyard. I think, some of the front yard parking that we've denied have been in situations where the situation with the lot was common, and we didn't want to create a situation of basically paved front yards on a block, and we felt that it would be a situation where the town would allow overnight parking, and in some of those situations, the town subsequently did allow overnight parking on the block concerned. That's not going to occur here. There's no reason on earth that the township would grant overnight parking on Lexington. Most of the properties have driveways, access to the rear yard, have conforming or semi-conforming parking, and there's no need for it, as there has been in the areas where overnight parking has been allowed. So I think, and in this type of situation where there is a solution, I think it's, that they've clearly met the criteria under a C1 variance as to, given the location of the house on the property relative to the two side yards, there's no way a conforming driveway can be done. Given the adjacent house did basically the exact same thing they did in order to accommodate the driveway on theirs by cutting off their front porch. I think that's an unfortunate solution, but it is the only solution. I don't, this is not going to result in a substantial detriment to the neighborhood or a substantial impairment to the zone plan. It is making the property more conforming than it is currently by providing the parking, and I don't think we've reached the point that where we can say, well, people aren't going to be driving, so they don't need a driveway. Conditions, I will save the little kicker condition, which is probably going to be a meaningless statement. That the driveway and the parking area be done in a way to preserve the large tree that's located at the rear of the property. That the pavement on the east side of the house, the current driveway, be removed and replaced to the curb and replaced with vegetation, whether you do shrubs, lawn, whatever you feel is appropriate. That that they comply with the stormwater ordinance. And my little kicker condition, which I don't think will happen in time, but we're going to say it anyway. In the event the neighbor to the east comes to its senses after they're informed that they're in violation and either need to fix the driveway so it's conforming or come to us for a variance, and decides they're willing to do the easement that our prior approval anticipated, that, if that occurs and you have not yet built the driveway, you will do the easement. If by the time that occurs, or if it never occurs, you've built the driveway, you have the driveway. But just on the odd outside chance that after an inspection is done by the town and they determine that that driveway that was constructed on the neighbor's property does not meet the 1-foot setback, as clearly it doesn't, because there's pavement totally between the houses with a little brick curb, maybe they'll think twice. I'm not at all optimistic, but on the odd chance that that does occur, I'd like to leave that possibility open, but any further discussion among the board members?
Mr. Chairman, regarding if that doesn't happen, right, the kicker condition, do we want to also add a condition to modify the apron on the?
Yeah, I said to the curb,
Okay,
yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? If not, someone want to make a motion?
I move approval with the conditions as set by the chair.
Is there a second?
Second. Second.
Seconded by Mr. Simon. We'll take a roll, starting with Mr.
Richard.
McCullough. Oh,
I'm sorry. Do we need 5 or do we need?
No.
4.
Thank you.
Simple majority. Mr. McCullough?
Yes.
Mr. Caulfield?
No.
Mr. Church?
No.
Mr. Harrison?
Yes.
Mr. Simon?
Yes.
Mr. Vieira?
Yes.
That's approved with those conditions. Thank you.
And we just need the one meeting, middle of October meeting.
Yes, the earlier meeting is planned to be canceled, right?
And do we have anything other than the Walnut Street application at this point?
Two simpler residential applications coming in.
These are simple, but, okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you.
Opposed? Good night, all.